Words on South Africa for not only this game but also across the Rugby Championship. I want to thank you for the talent that you've shown. I want to thank Rassie for changing the team on a regular basis and giving players a lot of opportunities. If you watch my videos on a regular basis, you know that's something that I support, and I think Rassie is doing a fantastic job at doing that. I want to thank all the South African fans because they show so much passion and enjoyment for the game. It was obvious again yesterday at the Mbombela Stadium. It was a fantastic atmosphere from what I could see on my television. There was a brilliant festival atmosphere. The recognition of Eben Etzebeth was fantastic. He's been a great ambassador for the game and continues to be so. And I'm just loving what South Africa as a nation and as a rugby team and as a coach are bringing to the game of rugby. I think during this, the 200th anniversary of the game, the South African team are absolutely on top, showing us the way. And it's a challenge, isn't it, now for all of the rest of us to bring up our level of play, to be able to take on the South Africans and to try and beat them. That's the challenge that's set down. Let's see whether we can make it happen. This year in 2024, we are celebrating the 200th anniversary of the invention of the great game of rugby. And what a fantastic milestone that is for the game. Now, throughout those 200 years, there have been different nations leading the way, dominating, leading the innovation in the game and bringing it to the next level. Well, in this particular era, it's South Africa's turn to lead that domination in world rugby. Let's talk about that great game that was played in Mbombela Stadium yesterday in South Africa. G'day everyone and welcome to Inside Rugby with Mark. If you haven't been here before, my name is Mark. I'm a retired Kiwi bloke. I'm a huge rugby fan and I live here in beautiful Cancun in Mexico, making videos about rugby, just sharing my passion for the great game and hoping that I'm playing a small role in helping the great game grow across the world during my retirement here in Mexico. Now, one thing to ask you today, I'm going to be making a video tomorrow where I'm going to be addressing your comments. Anything to do with the Rugby Championship, anything to do with the South Africa versus Argentina game or New Zealand versus Australia game, I will share my opinion on your comments in those particular videos. So get to it now. Drop your comments down, things that you might want to share, your opinions, your ideas, your suggestions. It could be about teams, players, coaches, results of any particular game in the Rugby Championship, and let's get into having a good healthy conversation around some of those comments. So that's coming tomorrow, Monday, here on Inside Rugby with Mark. But today it's all about South Africa and Argentina. Mbombela Stadium yesterday in the beautiful Lowveld of South Africa, and what a game it was. But what more importantly was the expectation around this game. Of course, it is Eben Etzebeth's 128th cap for the Springboks, making him the most capped player in Springbok history, and what a huge occasion it was. It was fantastic to see him getting recognised before the game when he led the team out with his family, and they had a lot of festival atmosphere around the stadium. It was absolutely brilliant stuff. And then we saw Nina Brand belting out the South African anthem, and before we knew it, it was time for both teams to take the field. Now, what was going to happen in this game? This was really interesting. We had a bunch of Argentinian players that have flown all the way over to South Africa, and they were tired from beating South Africa the previous week. They lost Marcos Crema. Pablo Matera was on the bench with, and also Sinti. So there was a bit of a change up in the Argentinian lineup. For the Springboks, though, they had their A team in, and you know I hate talking about A, B and C teams, but they had their full strength team in yesterday, ready to go. A lot of the players rested, and one in particular I was really looking forward to watching, and that was Cheslin Kolbe. What was he going to be able to do in this game yesterday? Well, who would have predicted that this game would have started just like we saw last weekend in Argentina? It was quite bizarre, wasn't it? South Africa right on the front foot early on in the game, and they came out, I thought, playing absolutely the right tactical game to take it to this Argentina team. They put the pressure on from the start. They had raids towards the Argentinian line, but they played for territory, and it was done very smartly through good play by Mani Lebok And of course, so many people had been giving Mani Lebok a hard time because of what happened last week, but he came out and instantly started making a difference, I felt, in this game against Argentina. A lot of the play that was going wide was because of his great passing, hitting the spot and getting South Africa on the front foot in a way that it's going to be very, very hard for them to defend in this game for Argentina. So there was no surprise to me that they went in for an early try, South Africa, and it was that man, Fassi, again, who went over. He's really starting to build into something special at fullback, isn't he, Fassi, for the Springboks? He's played very well throughout this year's Rugby Championship, and he was right on the spot again, running a perfect line to get that ball and to get over and score the first try for South Africa. So Fassi had gone over for the try. We saw the conversion by Jaden Henry. Yes, he was taking the kicks yesterday. He got that one over, so South Africa was shot out to 7-0. And I was thinking, here we go again, Argentina. We're going to be on the back foot to start off with. And I tell you what, it was only 6 minutes later in the 14th minute of the game, and we saw Peter Steph du Toit doing a NFL impersonation. Now, I know this guy does everything on a rugby field, but I'd never seen him do this before. He went up over top of the ruck and scored a try for South Africa, impersonating someone from the Kansas City Chiefs. And let's hope Peter Steph du Toit doesn't deflect off to the NFL. But he was on the spot again and using his amazing athletical skills to get over and score that try for South Africa. So already after 14 minutes of the game, South Africa were putting the pedal on the metal, giving Argentina a half time, but they were executing their plays very, very well. Jaden Hendricks got the conversion over. South Africa shot out to 14-0 after as many minutes, and I was thinking, here we go again. But there was something very different in this game for me, and it was about how it started at the beginning with the first couple of scrums. The South African scrum was so dominant in the beginning, and I felt as though this is where Argentina had made a couple of mistakes, and also they were a little bit unlucky with their injury count. So missing from those scrums with Marcos Crema and Pablo Matera, and I think they're two people that really have a big impact on the Argentinian scrum. Putting that aside though, South Africa were absolutely dominant, there was no doubt about it, and perhaps even with Matera on the field in those early stages and Marcos Crema, it wouldn't have made too much of a difference. But I think Argentina did miss those guys in the scrum in the early stages just to settle things down for the Argentinian Los Pumas. But South Africa came to play in this game, and I'd said in my pre-game video how I thought that front row for South Africa was going to really make a difference in this game, and we saw it in those early scrums, didn't we? There was 3 in particular in the first 15 minutes where South Africa were just absolutely dominant. They pushed Argentina off the ball, they gave themselves a penalty advantage, and they put themselves on the front foot, and that was excellent strategic play by South Africa. It was exactly what they were wanting to do, to keep Argentina under pressure, using the structure of their game and using that forward domination. So as far as I was concerned, South Africa started off this game exactly the way that they wanted to play, and then when they had the opportunity, they would go wide. So they would score tries like we saw from Fassi early on, but we also saw Mani Lebok starting to come into his own early in this game and using cutout passes and very wide passes out to the wingers. We saw Kurt Lee Ardensa in the play early in the game. We saw Cheslin Colby in the game early on, and as a result of this, South Africa were gaining really good meters and putting a lot of pressure on Argentina. You know how it is when you're watching games sometimes and you just think, the opposition hasn't really turned up today and things aren't quite going their way. Whereas last weekend for Argentina, in Argentina, the bounce of the ball, just some of those quick decisions were going the right way, the passes were sticking. It didn't start off for Argentina in this way. We saw Mateo Carreras making a couple of errors early on, drop balls. Choco Barras dropped one as well, and you just got the sense that through both the South African pressure that they were putting on and Argentina's perhaps tiredness, they weren't really in the game like they were last weekend. So when South Africa shot out to 14-0 early in this game again this week, I thought there's probably no way back for Argentina in this particular game. As they continue to do, they surprise everybody, and in the 18th minute it was that man Albanoz again who went through the South African defensive line and scored a fantastic try to get Argentina on the scoreboard. And it was a great motivator for the Los Pumas because they were really under the pump up until that stage in the game against South Africa. So Albinos again darted in. It was almost a replica try from what he scored last week against the Springboks, and he gave the Argentinian Pumas a big chance of getting back into this game. The conversion was successful, so the game was back to 14 points to 7. And now what was the South African team going to do? Well, as is often the case after you score points in a game, something happens within the next minute that either elevates you to the next level of motivation or it takes the wind out of your sails, and that's exactly what happened for Argentina from the restart. They had a player in front of Santiago Carreras when he was kicking the ball, and it gave away a soft penalty opportunity to South Africa. So straight after the Pumas had scored that try, South Africa got a penalty opportunity. Jaden Hendricks came up, kicked the goal successfully, and South Africa bounced out to 17 points to 7. And it's just these small margins, isn't it, in these big international games that can make such a difference with momentum swings and opportunities for the other teams to get on the front foot. And this gave the Springboks another opportunity to go ahead and start to play, whereas Argentina had just scored that try. They would have had their tails up, and then they make a silly, easy mistake like that that gave the opportunity away to South Africa. And then in the 25th minute of the game, a huge play in the game that was a negative for the Los Pumas. Choco Barras unfortunately got chopped down in a tackle with Fassi. There was no ill intent at all in the tackle. It was just the way he fell down, but he got his leg terribly caught and bent under that scenario, and we saw Choco Barras limping off the field. And I hope that he hasn't got any long-term medial ligament damage, because it didn't look very good, but he was able to walk off the field. That's a good thing. But this really was going to make a difference for the Argentinian Los Pumas. Choco Barras has been, without a doubt, their best centre during this Rugby Championship campaign, both on offence and defence. I talk about it in my videos on a regular basis, and I was sure for one that when Senti came on to replace Choco Barras, we weren't going to see the same level of impact, whether it be through his strong offensive runs that Choco Barras does or his great defensive work in that inside centre channel. And that was actually going to be the case in this game. So that was a huge moment around the 25th minute. A lot of this was coming from the South African pressure. They were playing very, very well. We saw an opportunity where Jesse Kriel took off down the right side of the field. He had a pass to Peter Steph-Toy, who unfortunately dropped it on the wing. He doesn't usually do that. He's one of the best wingers in the game, is Peter Steph-Toy, as far as I'm concerned. But on this occasion, he fumbled the ball, and it was a lost opportunity for the Springboks to go in for yet another try. 5 minutes later, we saw another incident that really showed that Los Pumas weren't having the best day at the office. Mateo Carreras, that man that I've been talking about, who's very good at scoring tries, he went up for a collision on Fassi, and it was a high ball take, and he got himself in the wrong position. He was taking the player out, unfortunately, and the referee, Ben O'Keefe from New Zealand, see, we always have an impact on every game, even if we're not playing. Ben O'Keefe gave a yellow card quite correctly to Mateo Carreras, and he was off for Argentina. So in terms of Argentina, we're really now at the coalface in this game. They were up against a South African team that was on the rampage, playing very expansive, accurate rugby. They'd lost a couple of soft penalties to the Springboks. They'd lost one of their star players, and now they'd received their first yellow card in this year's Rugby Championship. So it was really going downhill for the Los Pumas, and I was starting to feel a little bit sorry for them. What I'd really wanted to see in this game, which wasn't going to happen, was a fresh Argentinian team, their best team being able to take on the Springboks. But unfortunately, as it happens in a lot of these games, we see different things happen during the game, and it leads to it being a little bit unbalanced. On top of that, you had the Springboks playing at the best level that I've seen them play at so far in this year's Rugby Championship. They were really on point yesterday with their execution, and I tell you what, I think a lot of that had to do with Manny Lebok, his ability to be able to steer the game from number 10, forgetting about the kicking woes that he's had because Jaden Hendricks was taking the kicks. Another masterstroke from Rassie Erasmus for yesterday's game, and it allowed Lebok to be free in his mind and to be able to play the game that we all know that he's capable of doing. And he was carving it up from number 10. He was putting players through gaps. He was calling the plays. Those cross-field kicks really impactful for both Cheslin Colby and Kurt Lee Ardenser. And it was really putting South Africa on the front foot, because once those two wingers got involved, then the second phase of play was coming through, and we were seeing big games from Jasper Wiese, who was making some good bustling runs up the centre of the field, and with Peter Steph-Toy in there to help clean out, and Sia Khaleesi was having another great game for the Springboks. The Springboks were all over Argentina in terms of the breakdown and winning that ball back early, so the likes of Jaden Hendrickse and Manny Lebok could control the game. It was a brilliant execution effort, I thought, from South Africa in that first half. They were putting a lot of pressure on Argentina, but more importantly, they were also getting down in the red zone and coming away with points, so they were keeping the scoreboard ticking over. So with Argentina down to 14 men with that yellow card to Carreras, were the Springboks going to make them pay for it? Well, it only took 3 minutes and they were in for another try. And it was that man Fassi again who was in the right spot. And this is a great component for a fullback to be showing in the right and running the right angles to be able to score these tries. And we've seen it from Will Jordan this weekend for the All Blacks by getting involved, running the angles, getting the ball on the right angle to be able to get through the defensive line. And we saw that once again from Fassi at fullback for the Springboks. So he went in for a great try for the Springboks in the 32nd minute of the game. The yellow card punishment was handed out to Los Pumas, and the Springboks started out to 22 points to 7. Now, I had been watching Esgro, who was playing on the wing for Argentina in this game, and he had done a couple of things that were a little bit dubious in the first 30 minutes of the game, but by the time we got to the 35th minute of the game, he did something really amateurish, and that was he was chasing a ball back that was kicked through by South Africa. Kurt Lee Ardenser was coming at him at 100 miles an hour, but Esgro was walking around as though it was a Sunday afternoon walk and he was going down to the shop to get the newspaper. And he was very lucky that Ardenser didn't grab the ball and head over for a try. And it was interesting because 1 minute later, Contepomi took him off the field. Esgro was sitting on the bench and was not going to participate in this game anymore. I really like to see that from a coach, and when Contepomi pulled off Esgro, I thought that was a really good thing. If you're going to have a player that's not dialed into the game, he hasn't got his brain switched on, then he needs to be removed from the field, in my opinion, and that's exactly what happened. So we saw the end of Esgro from the particular game. Now, there was only a few minutes left to half-time, and I thought, okay, if the Springboks get in again before half-time, it's going to be game over, and they're going to just continue using this pressure that they built in this first half. They were playing extremely good rugby, whether it be kicking, they were contesting, whether it be going out wide, they were finding gaps in this Argentina line. And on occasions when Argentina were able to repel through good defensive work, South Africa just came again. And it was just their relentless pressure, whether it be a set piece through the scrums and the lineouts, or whether it be through that interchanging running that Manny Lebok was setting up from number 10. It was fantastic play. We saw Damien Diolandi getting really into the game as well. And of course, him and that historic pairing with Jesse Creel at outside centre again in this game made a really big difference for the Springboks compared to what we saw last weekend with Lucano Arm in that number 12 jersey. So I guess to many of us in the 37th minute, there was no surprise where we saw another magical move by the Springboks backline set up by Manny Lebok, who set up a great pass out to Fassi, and then he drew another wonderful pass out to Cheslin Kolbe, who was about 10 metres out from the try line. He still had a bit of work to do. And what did he do? He put on his 10-metre sidestep to get through the Argentinian defence to score a fantastic try. I actually think he went further across field than he did going towards the line in that particular movement, Kolbe. And he ended up getting over the line with two Argentinian players grabbing to his back but not able to stop him. So it was a fantastic try from the Springboks. Started off again by Manny Lebok, out to Fassi, and then on to Cheslin Kolbe on the wing. And that's exactly the kind of game that the Springboks were playing yesterday. It was expansive, it was accurate, and they were using the talents that they've got out wide. And this has got Tony Brown written all over it, this type of play from the Springboks. And I think that's what's making the Springboks team so exciting to watch for me, and also for some other neutral rugby fans across the world. So the conversion of that try was missed from Jaden Hendrickse. He did have a couple of blemishes with his boot, but in this game it wasn't going to cost South Africa anything at all. And before we got to half-time, well, we still had a minute to go after the conclusion of that try, and we saw Mateo Carreras come back on for Argentina. So they were back up to full strength for the last 60 seconds of the first half. but the damage had been done. The Springboks had scored 2 tries since Carreras had been off the field, and that's exactly what a coach wants to see. And this is where game management and game intellect comes into it for these top teams as well. If you've got your opponents down, you've got to take advantage of it and put points on the scoreboard. And that's exactly what South Africa did during that 10-minute period when Mateo Carreras was off the field. So we went to half-time at 27 points to 7 in favour of the Springboks, and for me the game was all over. I could see enough from this game that we weren't going to have an Argentinian resurgence like we saw last weekend in Argentina, and the reason for that was Mani Lebok. He was playing absolutely brilliant with the South African team. He was the general around the field, both with his kicking and also with his passing and distribution. His game intellect to be able to put players through space and to use that big wide bullet pass that he's got was absolutely causing havoc to Argentina. And I think one of the biggest stats that came out of that first half for me was the tackle count. Argentina had to make 92 tackles in that first half compared to South Africa's 44. So more than double, and it was making Argentina tired, and they were starting to fall off tackles, and South Africa were able to break through and score those tries. So it was a very impressive display from me for South Africa. It was probably their best first half of rugby in the Rugby Championship. Let me know in the comments if you agree with that one or not. But I thought they really started off really well in this game, but they kept their foot on the metal. And that was the difference between this week and last week in Argentina. There was no way South Africa was going to let Argentina back into this game. And I think that Choco Barras injury, the Mateo Carreras yellow card, that really hurt Argentina in the beginning of that game. Now, halftime, what would Rassie say to his players? Well, I think that when I've watched all the Rugby Championship games this year, one thing becomes very apparent. Teams are not able to play at that high level for 80 minutes. It's impossible. So there are going to be periods throughout the game where your level falls off a little bit, where the opposition might get some momentum going, and those are the critical parts of the game where your team needs to be able to manage it. So I'm sure Rassie would have said at halftime, okay boys, we've got a 20-point lead as we're going into the second half. Argentina might come out and they might get a little bit of ball early in the second half. We need to manage our emotional levels, but also the way that we're playing the game. And then the game will come back to us. And when it does and we start to get that momentum again, it could be through the bench coming on, then we've got to capitalise and go again. And I think that's one of the things that coaches in this year's Rugby Championships need to be very aware of. Their team is going to have a period of the game where they're not on fire, when they're not scoring points, and when the opposition is getting better for them. We've seen it in every game so far in this year's Rugby Championship. And I think that's the most important part of the game for your team. You need to be able to manage your way through that with clever intellectual play, but also structure, so you don't lose the structure of the game. I think that's what Rassie would have said to the boys at halftime. On the other side, I think Contepomi would have started to recognise that this just wasn't going to be Argentina's day. South Africa were playing too well. The crowd was in the game. Argentina had lost a player to the sin bin, but he was probably hoping and saying to his players, right, let's get out there. We've got pride in our jersey. We've had a wonderful Rugby Championship competition this year. We've beaten Australia, New Zealand and South Africa. Let's get out there and try and win the second half. I think that would have been the message that Contepomi had set for his players at the beginning of the second half. Looking at some of the players in that first half that really stood out for me in the game, on the South African side, there was no doubt about it. We saw huge games from Mani Lebok. I thought Jaden Hendrikse was doing very well at halfback. I'm not a fan of Hendrikse's, but I will give credit where credit's due, and I thought he played very well in the beginning of this game. Also, Fassi at fullback was really impressing me. The more I see of him, his counter-attacking abilities is absolutely fantastic under the high ball, and he once again demonstrated that in the first half. Two of the best wingers in world rugby at the moment, in Cheslin Colby and Kurtley Ardenser, were just absolutely on point in this first half. They're dangerous when they get the ball at any time during the game, and they showed their abilities again in that first half of rugby. But for me, it was the Springboks forwards. It was that front row of Bonami and Oxenchair and also Franz Maherba that were really putting the pressure on Argentina and giving the South Africans a lot of front foot play that they could go through the structure of the scrums and the lineouts. Peter Steph du Toit was just being Peter Steph du Toit, and I thought the leader, Sia Kolesi, was doing a fantastic job in this game. You could see him getting very emotional on the field. He was yelling at the players, and that's something that we don't see from the likes of Scott Barrett, do we, for the All Blacks, as an example. I know that different captains captain in different ways, but it's brilliant to see a leader like Sia Kolesi shouting and screaming and encouraging his players to go into battle behind him. And I think that's something that's missing from a team like the All Blacks at the moment. Let's not get sidetracked though and keep focused. And I think Eben Etzebeth had a brilliant first half for South Africa. He was great in the lineouts along with Ruan Norkia. And I think this combination of locks for the Springboks is spot on at the moment. These two guys are playing fantastic rugby. They're up there for sure as some of the best locks in world rugby. And they did a great job again in that first half. For the Los Pumas, Albinos stood out again for me in that first half, but unfortunately we hadn't seen the likes of Mali and Santo Carreras doing a lot of great stuff. Mateo Carreras got sent off, of course, with that yellow card, and Choco Barras was missing because of that injury. So Argentina were a little bit deflated. We saw Matera come on because Juan Martin Gonzalez got a HIA that he had to go off and attend to, and it seemed to disrupt a little bit the Argentinian play. They just weren't on their point for this particular game, and as I said, a lot of that had to do with the pressure of the Springboks. So we got into the second half. What was going to happen? Well, we had to wait and find out. Well, the intent was clear from South Africa in the beginning of the second half when Jasper Wiese got the ball and took off on a run like a back, getting 40 metres up the field and putting pressure on Argentina immediately. So it was a great start to the second half. And something like that just gets the players enthusiastic again to go for it. And I'm sure that would have helped the South African players just to turn the dial back on again, get tuned into the game. And it was a great run by Jasper Wiese. Well, what happened in the early parts of the second half was exactly what I said. The game wasn't like the first half. It became a bit of an arm wrestle, and Argentina were trying their best to try and disrupt this game. South Africa fell away a little bit. I felt as though they were trying to push that final pass a little bit too early. They had too much confidence, if that's a thing, and I think it is. So they were enjoying their rugby so much in the first half, they wanted to come out and try and replicate that early in the second half. And as a result, it got a little bit scrappy for me. And South Africa were just trying to do too many things in terms of getting through gaps, smart little kicks that weren't coming off, and things like that. So it took them quite a while to get on front foot again in the second half. But before they did, it was Argentina that had their backs to the wall, and this time it was Pablo Matera who had a brain fade and took a player out. I think it was Vincent Koch. He took Vincent Koch out, and as a result of that, he got a red card. And of course, that was going to be the end of it for Argentina. So as far as the second half went, it was Argentina down to 14 men. It was the Springboks trying to find their mojo again. And it took them, honestly, until about the 69th minute where we saw Malcolm Marx go over for a good try to the Springboks. And this was putting the icing on the cake. It got the crowd back into the game at a fever pitch level because the Rugby Championship for 2024 was definitely coming to South Africa on top of their great World Cup campaigns, their Freedom Cup win. It was another trophy for the cabinet of the South African Rugby Union. And that was Malcolm Marx's 21st try in international rugby, and he always seems to turn up at the right time, doesn't he, for the Springboks? He's a beast of a man, and there was no way that the Argentinians were going to stop him from a couple of metres out. Things were going to get worse for Argentina. They were going to lose another man through a yellow card, Santiago Carreras this time, and really the day was just going from bad to worse for Argentina. And it was a celebratory moment for South Africa in this game in the second half because there was no way that Argentina were going to get back into it. And Argentina were just trying to get to the finish line now and get to the end of the game. But South Africa weren't done, and when championship teams come to play and they're in this kind of form, they do not take their pedal off the metal. So we saw two more tries to South Africa in the last 10 minutes of this game. The first coming in the 72nd minute to Peter Steph du Toit, getting his second try of the game, a fantastic effort from him. And then just before full time, we saw Jesse Kriel get a just deserved try for South Africa. He went over and scored their last try, and the game was absolutely wrapped up. 48 points to 7 in the end, an absolutely dominating win from the South African Springboks in this game. And ironically for Argentina, they didn't get their full complement of 15 players back on the field until the 78th and a half minute. So just 90 seconds to go, they had 15 men on the field, and it wasn't going to be long enough for them to score a try. They tried very hard in the last minute to try and get over the South African line, but once again the South African defence was immense on this particular day, and there was no way that Argentina were going to get across the line. So in the end, a very, very impressive win by South Africa, 48 points to 7 in the end. A rugby championship in the bag. Manny Lebok, the new hero of South African rugby. Boy, how long does a week take in rugby to turn around the fortunes of a rugby player? But you know what, when it comes to Manny Lebok, all the kudos I think has to go to Rassie Erasmus for putting him in and starting him this weekend, because it was a masterstroke, as I had said in my pre-game video. It gave Manny the confidence to get out there and play his game. He took away the kicking responsibilities and gave them to Jaden Hendricks, and that's all that needed to be done. Manny Lebok did the rest. But it was a comprehensive South Africa performance. They were by far, I think, the best team in the Rugby Championship this year, even despite the close games against the All Blacks that could have gone a different way. The South Africans, once again, they find a way to win these games when they are close. Kudos to Argentina for that game in Argentina last week and beating the world champions. I think that was a great just deserved for their competition this year. For them to be able to beat every team, that's going to give them a lot of confidence. They would have been sad about their performance yesterday, but up against that South African team that was just running right across the field, they've got to lift their game to that level, and they've got to see how they can compete with that in the future. So in summarising this game, I've got these few things to say. First of all, I think this was the right selection for the best Springbok team in form at the moment. I think having Nortje and Etzebeth in there at number 4 and 5 is a good thing for South Africa. I was impressed with Jaden Hendricks yesterday and what he did. Kobus Reinhardt came on towards the end of the game and did a few little good things as well. So I think from a halfback point of view, if Hendricks can play that level every week for the Springboks, then until Faf comes back, I think that's going to be the answer for the Springboks. He definitely allowed Manny Lebok to do his stuff. Lebok was outstanding. I think he's going to take so much confidence from this game. We're going to see a different Manny Lebok going forward in a Springbok jersey, and I think that's a good thing for world rugby, and it's a good thing for South African rugby as well. Deolandi and Kriel did their normal things in the centres and were absolutely on point, and Colby had a fantastic game on the wing, as did Kurt Lee Ardenser. He just did a couple of things, Ardenser, that caused a couple of penalties for the Springboks. He's got to watch that because he's had yellow cards in previous games. But Colby, for me, was the outstanding player in the Springbok jersey this weekend. He was absolutely into everything. And if all the wingers around the world watch Colby's work rate and watch his intent on a rugby field, then you will become a better player, because he leads the way with that. And then we've got Fassi at fullback. I thought the bench for South Africa did some good things when they came on as well. The front row continued the pressure, but there was a change in the game when the front row came on for South Africa, and that was the period of the game, as I was talking about, where the Springboks just went a little bit off their level and where there was some readjustment going on. So this is an interesting aspect of the game that I'm seeing across world rugby at the moment, and I'm going to talk about it in future videos. So watch out for that, because I'm noticing a trend, and it's something that coaches might pick up on and start to address. I'll leave that for another day. On the Argentinian side, well, it was a game that got away from them early on again, and they weren't able to come back. Unfortunate through a couple of injuries as well, but also they looked tired. They looked as though that momentum and that emotion they got from last week's game didn't flow through to South Africa. And as I said in my pre-game video, it's a damn hard place to go and play rugby and to come away a winner. And I think Argentina, Contaponi in particular, would have learnt a lot from that experience yesterday at Mbombela Stadium. And I think that's going to set up Argentina very good for their games towards the end of this year. I've been extremely impressed with Argentina this year. They're definitely one of my favourite teams in world rugby now, and I think they've got a very bright future, and I hope that when we get to Australia in 2027, Argentina are going to be one of those teams that are going to be fighting for the win in the Rugby World Cup. I think they've got that much potential. But as I said at the beginning of this video, we are celebrating the 200th anniversary of the game of rugby this year, and for me, South Africa continue to be the leaders in the game across the world. They're showing us how it's done. They've got some brilliant players in all kinds of different positions across the field, and while they're in the kind of behavior and form that they showed yesterday at Mbombela, then they're going to be able to beat most teams on the planet. I say that though, and I don't lose hope for the others, because I think South Africa are beatable. I'm going to talk about how that can be done in future videos, so stick around for that and watch those videos on my channel. In fact, if you're enjoying my content here on Inside Rugby with Mark, here are 5 ways that you can support my channel. Please hit the subscribe button. It's a real nuisance for me, this, because 80% of people that watch my videos on a regular basis do not subscribe to the channel. It happens to be a big thing for us YouTubers, getting subscriptions, and it doesn't cost you anything to do that to support the channel. So if you can hit the subscribe button after today's video, I would thank you very much for doing that. But here's some other ways that you can support the channel. Don't forget to follow me on Twitter as well, because I'm putting a lot of content over there, and we can have a chat backwards and forwards about all sorts of things as we can in the comments here. So now's the time to hit the keyboard, put your comments down about this game. What did you think about it if you were a South African? Did you go to the game yesterday at the Mbombela Stadium? Let me know what the atmosphere was like. Let me know if you're a neutral fan on this one, and let me know if you're from Argentina and what you thought of your team's performance yesterday. Was it a bridge too far for Argentina? Folks, that wraps up this weekend's editions of Inside Rugby with Mark. I'll be back tomorrow with another video, and remember, I'm going to be addressing your comments in that video tomorrow. So I'll pull out a few comments that people have sent in recently over the Rugby Championship, and we'll start a conversation around those particular topics and see what you've got to say and think about those things, and I'll give you my views as well. Okay, I'll be back again really soon. Until then, you stay safe, stay well. Thank you for supporting my channel, and keep enjoying your rugby no matter where you are in the world. It's a fantastic game, and we can all celebrate it together. Until next time, it's time to say adios from beautiful Cancun in Mexico. I'll see you all again very soon. It's bye for now.